What if I told you that beneath the soil of modern Turkey, archaeologists uncovered an ancient city so breathtaking that it completely changed what we thought we knew about the Roman world, asterisk, asterisk. And hidden inside that city was a mysterious mosaic with eyes so haunting, people still can't stop staring at it nearly 2,000 years later. Who is this girl? Why does her face feel so alive? And how did one of history's greatest masterpieces remain buried for centuries? Asterisk, asterisk. In the next few minutes, we'll uncover the lost city of Zeugma and the incredible secrets hidden beneath its ruins. What if I told you that beneath the soil of modern Turkey, archaeologists uncovered an ancient city so breathtaking that it completely changed what we thought we knew about the Roman world? Asterisk, asterisk. And hidden inside that city was a mysterious mosaic with eyes so haunting, people still can't stop staring at it nearly 2,000 years later. Who is this girl? Why does her face feel so alive? And how did one of history's greatest masterpieces remain buried for centuries? Asterisk, asterisk. In the next few minutes, we'll uncover the lost city of Zeugma and the incredible secrets hidden beneath its ruins. In the year 2000, archaeologists had exactly 90 days to save 2,000 years of history before a government dam flooded it forever. Buried under the mud of the Euphrates River was a lost Roman city of 70,000 people and a pair of eyes. A mosaic girl, staring up from the floor of a villa, has haunted everyone who's looked into her face for the last 2,000 years. Nobody knows who she is. Nobody knows why she was made. And when the floodwaters came, she almost disappeared without anyone ever finding out. This is the story of Zeugma, the city built on a bridge, destroyed by an empire, forgotten for 1,000 years and finally rediscovered just weeks before it vanished underwater for good. Stick around, because by the end of this video, you'll understand why archaeologists call this the most heartbreaking rescue in the history of Roman archaeology. Welcome back to the channel. If this is your first time here, we tell the stories of lost cities, the places history nearly erased, and the people who fought to bring them back. Today, we're heading to the southeastern edge of Turkey, near the modern city of Gaziantep, to a place most people have never heard of, even though it holds one of the greatest collections of Roman art on the planet. Its name is Zeugma, and its story is everything. A conquering general, a bridge that made a city rich beyond imagination, a brutal siege that ended it all in a single day, 16 centuries of silence, and a race against rising water that came down to the wire. Before we start, if you enjoy deep dives like this, consider subscribing. We got a whole playlist of lost city stories waiting for you afterward. Now, let's go back to the beginning. Let's go back to 300 BC. To understand Zeugma, you have to understand what happened after the most famous death in ancient history, the death of Alexander the Great. In 323 BC, Alexander died in Babylon without a clear heir, and his massive empire, stretching from Greece to India, was suddenly up for grabs. His generals, men who had marched and fought beside him for over a decade, turned on each other in a decades-long scramble, now known as the Wars of Successors. Out of that chaos, one general carved out the largest piece of the pie, a man named Seleucus. Seleucus had been one of Alexander's inner circle, a hıstory, a companion officer, part of the elite cavalry that fought at Alexander's side in his greatest battles. When the dust settled, Seleucus controlled a vast stretch of territory across the Near East, and he founded his own dynasty, the Seleucid Empire. Now, founding an empire is one thing, holding on to it is another, and rulers like Seleucus knew that empires are held together by roads, trade routes, and rivers, the arteries that move soldiers, grain, and gold. One of those arteries was the Euphrates. The Euphrates is one of the two great rivers of Mesopotamia, the birthplace of civilization itself. For anyone trying to move an army or a caravan of silk and spices, across it, the river was both a lifeline and an obstacle. You needed a place to cross, and Seleucus found the perfect spot, a point where the river ran shallow enough, and the banks were shaped just right to support a bridge. So, sometime after 300 BC, Seleucus founded a city on the western bank of that crossing point, and named it, appropriately, Seleucia, one of dozens of cities he named after himself across his empire. To distinguish it from the others, this one carried the extra name on the Euphrates. And then he built a bridge. Not a bridge of stone arches like the Romans would later perfect, but pontoon bridge, a line of boats lashed together, spanning the river that could be assembled and disassembled as needed. It was simple, it was brilliant, and it was about to make the city very, very rich. Here's the part that made all the difference. Every single merchant, soldier, or traveler who wanted to cross the Euphrates at this point had to pay a toll. Every camel loaded with silk from the east. Every caravan carrying spices, glass, or grain. Every Roman legion marching toward the Parthian frontier. They all had to pass through this one narrow crossing. And they all had to pay. Think about that for a second. This wasn't a city that grew rich through farming or mining or conquest. It grew rich just by sitting in the right place at the right time, by controlling a doorway. Location was the entire business model. Across the river on the eastern bank, a twin settlement grew up too, later called Apamea, and together, these two cities functioned almost like a single urban system split by the water, connected by that same bridge of boats. Eventually, the crossing itself became so central to the city's identity that its name changed to reflect it. In Greek, Zeugma simply means bridge, yoke, or junction, literally a joining together. Over time, the old name faded, and the city became known simply as Zeugma, the city that was quite literally named after the thing that made it rich. For roughly 2 centuries, that was a story, a prosperous Hellenistic trading post, populated by Greek settlers, local Syrians, and, as we'll see later, a significant Jewish community, all living together at this crossroads between East and West. But the city's biggest transformation was still to come, and it would arrive on the point of a Roman sword by the middle of the 1st century BC. The Seleucid Empire that Seleucus had built was a shadow of its former self, fractured, weakened, and squeezed between rival powers. And into that power vacuum marched Rome. In 64 BC, the Roman general Pompey the Great, fresh off a campaign of conquest in the eastern Mediterranean, absorbed the remnants of the Seleucid territories into the Roman Republic. Zeugma, with its bridge and its river crossing, suddenly found itself sitting on the very edge of the Roman world, and directly across from Rome's most dangerous eastern rival, the Parthian Empire. This is the moment Zeugma stopped being just a wealthy trading town and became something far more strategically important, a frontier fortress. Here's why that mattered so much. The border between Rome and Parthia roughly followed the Euphrates River for hundreds of miles, and a river border is only as strong as its crossing points. Whoever controlled the bridges controlled where armies could move. Zeugma controlled one of the best crossings on the entire river. That made it, in modern terms, one of the most important military checkpoints on Rome's eastern frontier. So Rome did what Rome always did with strategically vital cities. It garrisoned it. At the height of its power, Zeugma became the base for an entire Roman legion. Specifically, at various points, elements of Legio Icitica, one of the units responsible for holding the eastern frontier against Parthia. That's thousands of professional soldiers, along with all their support staff, families, merchants, and camp followers, permanently stationed in and around the city. Now, picture what that does to an economy. You've got a legion's payroll flowing into local businesses. You've got military engineers building roads and fortifications. You've got soldiers retiring with land grants and pensions, settling down, starting families, spending money. Layer that on top of the existing toll revenue from the bridge. And Zeugma didn't just survive the Roman takeover. It exploded in size and wealth. At its absolute peak, historians estimate that Zeugma was home to as many as 70,000 people. To put that in perspective, that's comparable to the population of some of the mid-sized provincial capitals of the Roman world. An enormous number for a city this far east, this close to a hostile border. And where did all that money go? Right into the ground, literally into the floors of private homes. Wealthy Roman citizens, merchants, and officers began building elaborate multi-story villas along the slopes overlooking the river in a district we now call the Firat Valley houses. These weren't simple homes. They were status symbols, built around open courtyards called peristyles, with shallow reflecting pools designed to catch the light. And it's here that Zeugma's true legacy begins to take shape, because the owners of these villas commissioned something extraordinary to decorate them. Mosaics of quality that rivals anything found in Pompeii, Antioch, or Rome itself. We'll spend a lot of time on those mosaics in a few minutes, because they are, quite simply, the reason most people know Zeugma's name at all today. But first, it's worth pausing on something else archaeologists found in staggering quantities here. Something that tells us just how important Zeugma had become as an administrative hub of the Roman East. Buried in the ruins of what appears to have been an archive building, excavators uncovered more than 100,000 small clay seal impressions, known as bulli. These were used to seal official documents, letters, and contracts. A bulla was pressed with a signet ring or stamp, then attached to a rolled document to prove it hadn't been tampered with. 100,000 of them, found in a single collapsed archive, is the largest cache of its kind ever discovered. What that tells us is that Zeugma wasn't just a garrison town or a trading post. It was a serious bureaucratic center, a place where contracts were signed, taxes were recorded, and the machinery of empire quietly ground away, day after day, for centuries. Walking through the city in its prime, you had passed through not one but two agoras, a public marketplace inherited from its Hellenistic founding, and a newer Roman one built to Roman civic standards. You'd have found two sanctuaries dedicated to local and imperial gods, a stadium for athletic games, a theater carved into the hillside for performances, two full public bathhouses where citizens gathered to socialize as much as to bathe, legionary barracks and administrative buildings for the garrison, and sprawling residential quarters climbing up from the riverbank. Around the edges of the city lay its necropolis, the cities of the dead, spread across the eastern, southern, and western approaches.
This was not a backwater. This was one of the great cities of the Roman East. And for roughly 200 years, life here was by all appearances very good. But empires built on frontiers live and die by their frontiers. And Zeugma's location, the very thing that made it rich, was about to make it a target before we get to disaster. And there's a disaster coming. Let's actually spend some time inside these villas, because this is where Zeugma becomes truly unforgettable. If you were a wealthy Zeugma resident in the 2nd century AD, your home wasn't just a place to live. It was a canvas. Roman elites across the empire used mosaic floors to broadcast their wealth, education, and taste to every guest who walked through the door. And the artists working in Zeugma were operating at an exceptionally high level, arguably some of the finest mosaicists of the ancient Mediterranean world. These weren't abstract patterns or simple geometric borders, although those existed too. The showpiece mosaics depicted entire mythological scenes, render in almost painfully level detail, using thousands of tiny stone and glass tesserae, some smaller than a fingernail. Take, for example, one of the museum's most celebrated pieces, found in a home known as the Poseidon House. It shows the sea god Poseidon riding across the water in a golden chariot, pulled by hippocamps, those mythical creatures with the front half of a horse and the tail of a fish. Beneath him float Okeanos and Tethys, the primordial god and goddess of the rivers, their shoulders wrapped in coiling river monsters. And here's the detail that gets people every time. This mosaic wasn't just meant to be looked at. It sat inside a shallow decorative pool, and when the water was filled to about 6 inches deep, the tilted postures of the figures and the wave patterns around the border created an illusion. The whole scene appeared to ripple and move, as if Poseidon himself were surging across real waves. The ancient homeowner had essentially built a working special effect into his living room floor, 2,000 years before anyone had heard the word animation. Elsewhere, you'll find mosaic depicting Odysseus discovering the young Achilles hidden among the daughters of King Lycomedes on the island of Skyros, disguised as a girl to avoid being drafted into the Trojan War, a clever, literary scene that only someone with a serious classical education would fully appreciate. That was the point. These weren't just decorations. They were conversation pieces, meant to signal that the owner of the house was cultured, well-read, and worldly. There are mosaics of Dionysus and his followers mid-celebration. There's a scene of Zeus, disguised as a satyr, attempting to seduce the nymph Antiope. There's Zeus again, transformed into a bull, carrying off the princess Europa across the sea. Wall after wall, floor after floor, the villas of Zeugma turned Greek mythology into interior design. But of every mosaic ever pulled from the soil of Zeugma, one has become more famous than all the others combined, and it's the one we opened this video with. It's known informally as the Gypsy Girl. She's a small fragment, really, just a face framed by dark, braided hair, with a scarf tied behind her neck. But her eyes are the reason she's become an icon. They're rendered with such subtle shading and angle that no matter where you stand in the room, she appears to be looking directly at you. Sadness and warmth seem to exist in her expression at the same time, and archaeologists and visitors alike have struggled for decades to fully explain why the effect is so powerful. Nobody actually knows who she represents. Her gender itself has been debated. Some scholars have proposed she might not be a girl at all, but a stylized portrait of the young Alexander Great, whose image was sometimes rendered with soft, androgynous features in Hellenistic art. Others believe she's simply a Maenad, a follower of Dionysus, or an anonymous portrait of a local woman immortalized by an artist we'll never be able to name. The nickname Gypsy Girl is purely popular invention, inspired by her braided hair, and has nothing to do with any confirmed identity. She was discovered during the winter of 1998 into 1999, uncovered as part of a roughly 300 square meter villa floor, right in the middle of what would become a desperate last-minute rescue excavation, which we're about to get to, and in a strange twist we'll come back to later. For years, only part of her face was on display, because a portion of the mosaic had been illegally removed from the site and ended up overseas in the United States, before eventually being returned decades later and reunited with the rest of the piece. Beyond the mythological showpieces, Zeugma's mosaics also give us something rarer and in some ways more valuable, a direct window into ordinary Roman provincial life. Depictions of banquets, hunting scenes, domestic animals, and portraits of the homeowners themselves let us see how people in the specific corner of the empire, surrounded by Greek, Syrian, and Jewish neighbors, sitting on a militarized frontier, wealthy from trade and taxation, actually want to present themselves to the world. This is a city, remember, that historians estimate was home to as many as 70,000 people. Only a tiny fraction of that population could afford these elaborate villas. But it's precisely because those wealthy homes were built to last, solid stone foundations, deep mosaic floors, that they survived well enough, buried under centuries of silt and collapsed rubble, for archaeologists to eventually find them almost perfectly intact. Which brings us to the moment everything changed. Because for all its wealth, all its art, all its strategic importance, Zeugma's position on the frontier was a double-edged sword. And in the middle of the 3rd century AD, the other edge of that sword came down hard. By the 250s AD, the Roman Empire was in serious trouble. Historians call this stretch the crisis of the 3rd century, a roughly 50-year period when the empire was hit simultaneously by civil wars, plague, economic collapse, and invasions on almost every border at once. Emperors were rising and falling in months, sometimes weeks. And on the eastern frontier, a newly aggressive power had replaced the old Parthian Empire, the Sassanid Persians, under an ambitious and ruthless king named Shapur I. Shapur had been testing Rome's eastern defenses for years, but around 253 AD, some sources place it slightly later, he launched a devastating campaign deep into Roman Syria and the surrounding provinces. City after city fell, and Zeugma, sitting right on the frontier with its legion and its bridge, was directly in his path. What happened next was catastrophic. Zeugma, along with several other major eastern cities, was stormed and sacked by Shapur's forces. Archaeological evidence found across the site, collapsed buildings, layers of ash and destruction debris, weapons and skeletal remains left where they fell, paint a grim picture of a city that didn't just decline gradually. It was violently, suddenly destroyed in what appears to have been a single brutal assault. Think about the contrast for a moment. Just a generation or two earlier, wealthy families were commissioning artists to lay intricate mosaic floors of gods and heroes in their courtyards. And then, within what may have been a matter of hours or days, soldiers were storming through those same courtyards, and those same floors were being buried under burning roof beams and collapsing walls. In a strange way, that destruction is exactly why we know so much about Zeugma today. When a city is destroyed suddenly and then abandoned, rather than slowly renovated over centuries the way many ancient sites were, it acts almost like a time capsule. Nobody came back to reuse the building materials, plaster over the old mosaics, or build a new structure on top. The rubble just sat there, undisturbed, protecting what was underneath. Remarkably, Zeugma didn't simply vanish after Shapur's attack. The city was, at least partially, rebuilt, and it continued to exist, smaller, and never quite recovering its former glory as a Roman and then Byzantine settlement for several more centuries. But it had lost its position as a major military and economic hub. The world around it was changing too. The old Silk Road trade patterns were shifting. The Roman Empire itself was fracturing into east and west, and the long, slow story of decline had begun. The final chapters came in the 7th century AD, one of the most turbulent periods in the history of the Near East. This was the era of devastating wars between the Byzantine Empire and the Sassanid Persians, followed almost immediately by the explosive rise of the early Islamic Arab conquests, which swept through Syria and surrounding regions in just a few short decades. Amid these overlapping waves of invasion and conquest, the city that had once controlled one of the most valuable river crossings in the ancient world was finally abandoned for good. No dramatic final battle, no last stand that we know of, just a slow fade into the background as the population dwindled and eventually left entirely, leaving the ruins to be picked over by looters, buried by centuries of silt, and gradually swallowed by the landscape. For the next 1,300 years, Zeugma simply disappeared. Not physically. The mounds and ruins were still there, known locally, sitting quietly near a small village called Belkis, but its true scale, its wealth, and its incredible art lay buried and forgotten, unknown to the wider world. And that's how things might have stayed forever, if not for a decision made in the late 20th century that would nearly cost the world this entire lost city a second time. Fast forward to the 20th century. Southeastern Turkey, like much of the world, needed electricity and irrigated farmland to support a growing population. And the Euphrates River, the same river that had made Zeugma rich 2,000 years earlier, was seen as the answer, as part of a massive regional development effort. Turkey began constructing a series of dams along the Euphrates and Tigris rivers, designed to generate hydroelectric power and irrigate huge stretches of farmland. One of those dams was the Bayersick Dam, and its planned reservoir would flood a long stretch of the river valley, including, as it turned out, a significant portion of the ancient ruins of Zeugma. Here's the thing. Serious archaeological excavation of Zeugma had actually only started in 1987, carried out by teams connected to Ankara University. For years, work proceeded at the normal, careful pace of academic archaeology. Slow, methodical, painstaking. Nobody was in a rush, because nobody expected the site to be going anywhere. Then, in the late 1990s, the reality of the dam construction timeline became impossible to ignore. The Bayersick Dam was moving forward. The reservoir would begin filling, and a huge percentage of Zeugma, potentially including villas nobody had even excavated yet, was sitting directly in the flood zone. What followed was one of the most dramatic emergency rescue excavations in the history of archaeology. International teams, journalists, and researchers descended on the site as word spread that a lost Roman city, arguably rivaling Pompeii in quality of art, was about to be permanently submerged. News outlets, including major American newspapers, ran stories with headlines that read almost like disaster reporting, because, in a very real sense, that's exactly what this was, a race against the clock that had already been set in motion by bureaucrats who, quite reasonably, were not thinking primarily about ancient mosaics when they approved a hydroelectric dam. Archaeologists worked around the clock, sometimes literally, with excavation continuing under floodlights at night, racing to document, lift, and remove as much as humanly possible before the water arrived. It's during this frantic period, in the winter of 1998 into 1999, that the Gypsy Girl Mosaic was uncovered, quite literally as the clock was running out. The scale of what teams managed to save in that final push is staggering. In total, roughly 3,000 square meters of mosaic flooring, 140 square meters of painted fresco, for Roman fountains, 20 columns, and several limestone statues were carefully lifted, cataloged, and transported to safety at the Gaziantep Archaeology Museum, all before the waters of the new reservoir rose to claim the site.